Now I invite Dr. Oscar Pujol. Please.
आप सबको तो हमारा नमस्कार। मेरे लिए तो BHU में आ जाना घर जैसा आना है। I would say that I am very pleased to be here with all many old friends. I would like to thank first of all Professor Keti Tripathi for giving me the opportunity to be here. Also my very old friend and also my old boss, Kamachil, for also and a very special thanks also to Alvaro Enterria. He's here, he's been living, a Spaniard who's been living in Banaras for I think more than 20 years now. And I think that he has absorbed very well the dharmic qualities of the Indian discourse. It's really, I mean, as I say, it's a very, very, very special pleasure for me to be here. I like very much what Bernard Chowdhury has said about this old metaphor about the charcoal burner and garland maker, because this is found in the Mahabharata, and although we also read the Mahabharata, we never found this metaphor. It was only after reading one of Rajiv's article, I'm speaking about 12 years ago, where he was trying to show again to the West, as he's doing today, that democracy is not an invent of the Western mind. In a very interesting article, he ends up quoting this about the charcoal burner and the garland maker, which is a really, in a single metaphor, it tells a lot of things about how Indian tradition sees difference and how Indian tradition sees unity. And I think this is very important, because if we only think, I mean the book, and this is a very specific book about the differences, and he has made it very clear. But we have to keep in mind the garland metaphor, because as Professor Chowdhury said, differences finally are stringed into a single chord in India. And this is very important, because this is something that often it is lacking in the West. And Rajiv has given a whole chapter to that. Well, I hope we'll have time also for having a free discussion, because I think there are many issues here involved. But I will try to be brief, but I would like to begin, saying that being different, it's many things. It's a book about many, many different things. But I would like, for ease of exposure, to quote himself about what is being Indian, being different. And he says, being different is about facing differences by reversing the gaze on the West, looking at it from the dharmic point of view. Now, here there are three assumptions to start with. First, that East and West, they're essential difference, and that's one of the main topics of the book, and we'll see it a little more in detail. The second assumption is, and it's a very important one, it's not so obvious, and I think it's that it is possible to reverse the gaze, because that's also an assumption, that we can reverse them, because it means that somehow the colonial enterprise can be put to an end, and that's an important assumption. And finally, the third one means looking at the West from a dharmic point of view, which is also an assumption that there is a dharmic point of view. So we'll see these points a little bit in detail. Let's begin with facing differences. And I will repeat just for the sake, if you want, of understanding better Rajiv's book, these main four differences that he has stated. Even if I repeat, I think it's good for the whole audiences to keep it fresh in the mind. Remember that the four differences said is embodied knowledge against historicentrism, integral unity versus synthetic unit, and anxiety over chaos versus comfort and complexity with ambiguity. And the fourth one is cultural digestion versus Sanskrit non-translators. This is how he puts it. And I refer back to keep them in mind, because I will use a slightly different approach. We're facing difference between India and the West. And I use a slightly different approach out of my own experience, and I have to talk from my own experience, of course. And I would like to refer to a book that we produced also about 10 years ago. It was a conversation between a very famous and respected Sanskrit Pandit, the late Shri Vidyanivash Mishra, who is no longer with us, and a Spanish philosopher from Barcelona, Rafael Arguello. No? And more or less, we find out also 5 differences, which somehow, map into your differences. I will say them, and I won't take too long and too much longer time. The book is called From the Mediterranean to the Ganges, and recently has been translated in a pirated fashion because I didn't know that the book had been translated into English, so now you can buy it in India. So the first thing we realized, and this is a very obvious one, is that of course history and is very important for the Western civilization. He says it very well. No? So I won't go into it. The exclusivism of history is putting it forward very clearly. How you have historical vision. Historical vision is related to a place and time, and this is a kind of dictatorship of place and time regarding to that specific revelation or vision. So I won't really insist much, and I cannot go on the importance of myth, and I think he's done also that in the book. Myth is not something that is untrue, but rather is archetypal truth, which can be applied in many different historical contexts. But as I say, I don't want to go into that. While analyzing the difference between East and West, one that came also, and it's a correlative of history, is a difference in the conception of time. And this is a very important thing. As I say, it's intimately related to history. As Vidyanivash Mishra used to say, it's not only that Westerners, we have privilege, a kind of linear time, and we know that very well. Also, we know about psychological time. But what the Indian tradition knows is about different sort of, it's not only cyclical time, or as Vidyanivash Mishra put it, helicoidal time, because these cycles are not closed in themselves, they are not just circles. But Vidyanivash Mishra used to speak about experiential time. And he used to claim that the Indian tradition counts time not in an external objective way, but in an experiential way. What I mean by that? I mean that reckoning time, for instance, by the number of breaths that we take. This is a very typical thing, or reckoning time by dawn and sunset, etc., etc. So that was a very interesting thing. Experiential time is not psychological time. It's a time, it's perhaps the only real time that you can assume, because it's a time that you feel with your body, that you feel with your mind, and that really, as I say, it's very different from psychological time. So I think this is a very important. Another question which he also underlines in the book is that somehow our Western civilization, especially modern Western civilization, because here, and I think it's very important to distinguish between a modern West and we'll say a pre-modern West, which was much more closer to the Dharmic point of view, although different, of course, no? And we'll come back to this point. No? But as I was saying, time in India, in the Indian tradition, is a mental construct for many schools. I think in the yoga, they all have different, of course, it's a nirmita, as they say in Vyasa and the Yoga Sutras. It's a construct of mind. And somehow, and especially since Kant, we live in Europe, in the West, under the impression that we cannot beat time. That time is dead, and the time will, just wipe us out. While in the Indian tradition, we have a very strong tradition of conquering time, even eating time. We have these expressions, that the sage is able to eat up time and somehow live outside time. So this victory over time, I think it's another difference, it's already, and I think it's a very, very important one. In the way of counting time by experience, by the body and mind sensations, and also some external measurement. Right. Now the second difference we spotted at that time, I say that was 12 years ago, was the difference between, I say, modern West is profoundly anthropocentric. And anthropocentric in a very literal way, right? Now, this seems that is not the case with the Indian tradition, which, as Professor Mishra was saying, it's more biocentric, centered in life itself. And here we come again to your difference between integral unity and synthetic unity, because being biocentric means, as he puts it very well, means a metaphysics of non-separateness of reality. And I'm using your sentence exactly as you say it. It means that, you know, right from Brahma to a blade of grass, and we have this expression all the time in the Sanskrit text, from Brahma to Trina, there is a sutra Tara, you know, which permeates the whole creation. And it's this unity which I think it is very, very important. Now, not being anthropocentric and being biocentric is very important, I mean, I say for several reasons. I mean, one is the ecological one, which we are already suffering the effects of this extreme anthropocentrism where we stay. I mean, extreme anthropocentrism will say, okay, destroy nature if man is going to live well, because man is the center of the universe. So, the ecological problem is one of the effects of this extreme anthropocentrism, but also some forms of intolerant religion are also a form of anthropocentrism. Because we take anthropocentrism into religion. And then what we do, we create a kind of God, which is after all a Superman. And that's you know, and it doesn't work at all. No? I mean, it's just projecting your anthropocentric views on religion. The third difference that we also check, which is also somehow reflected in your distinction, is that religion is one thing and dharma is another thing. Now, this is a very obvious thing, but there is a huge difference between the concept of Abrahamic religion and the concept of dharmic religions. There are many also points where both and somehow, you know, come together, especially in the mystic experience, etc., etc. But it's true. It's true that there are basic difference in the way the West has understood orthodoxy and heterodoxy, and the way India has understood heterodoxy and orthodoxy. As the late Raymond Panikar used to say, India is more a civilization that doesn't look for orthodoxy, but looks more for a kind of orthopraxis, which is even more important than orthodoxy. The fourth, and this is a very important one, that we saw also difference even in the modern West and India regarding the status of knowledge. Knowledge is a very different thing. First of all, in India you have two kinds of knowledge, para and para-knowledge. You have a knowledge, you know, which you know that knowledge and nothing else remains to be known, a kind of metaphysical non-dual knowledge, which, although it was also present, let's say, in the ancient traditions of the West, finally somehow, and maybe because of Renaissance, it gets diluted. Non-duality almost disappeared in the philosophical map of the West, but it remains central in India. And that's a very important, for me, the approach to non-duality, and this is a personal opinion, is perhaps one of the most strong characteristics of Indian society, which accounts for diversity, which accounts also for diversity, I don't want to use this word, I don't like it, tolerance, okay? It's a word that is being subject to a lot of critique, not only here, also now in the West. It's not enough, as he says very well. But I say non-duality accounts for many things. I will go. But I am interested also in saying, if you have knowledge which is both para and apara, which is not only scientific knowledge as we know, it is very important to understand that what we call today scientific knowledge is a recent invention. It begins in the Renaissance, and it operates through a kind of, what I was going to say now should be taken with a grain of also skepticism and a grain of, there is a kind of scientific knowledge which is a reduction of human knowledge. And this reduction takes place in three ways. The first thing, I will say, knowledge becomes simply measurement. Knowledge becomes measurement by penetration. And this begins in the Renaissance. What I mean for that? It means that to know something for the Renaissance man, and after Enlightenment even more, is to take the object, break it, penetrate it, and then analyze its constituents. This happens in art, where where perspective is invented. It happens in music, where polyphony is also invented. And it happens in scientific knowledge, where rational knowledge and speculative knowledge is dismissed once and for all, which is a very dangerous trend for the human life. So as I said, knowledge is, that's why it's not the chance that all of a sudden, in the West, people begin to dissect cadavers, corpses, because they can break. That before was not that. There was a difference between a traditional practitioner who can diagnose your illness and even cure it by touching your nail, and somebody who was to break you in pieces, take here with the lungs here, and then, somehow put you again together. So this penetration of knowledge is very important, but it's not also the penetration of knowledge which is done there. Also the human being, basically, it is reduced to a body with a somehow conscious mind. Later on, as we progress, this conscious mind is reduced to the brain. And brain is matter. I mean to say that there is a whole construction of the human being as pure matter, as pure materialism, which in my opinion, combining this kind of knowledge with capitalism and with consumerism, gives us the actual product. Man as a consumer being, as an individual who is just good for consuming. And finally, that knowledge does another thing. It reduces society to a nation state. And I know that, and what he has said in his book, and he's right, the critique of nation state by developed nations sometimes is very tricky, because it softens the praise, as he said, But we must be critical, even then, of nation state. I say, so you reduce a society to a nation state where you have one language, we have one religion, and one people. And this is a very dangerous thing, because it kills diversity at its root, and it opens the way for all kinds of exclusivistic nationalisms and fundamentalisms. And this is also happening in contemporary India. We want to reduce India to a homogeneous nation state and somehow killing all the difference. But as modernity grows, this reduction of society is even done a little step further, which is happening today in what we can call postmodern societies, as I said, where the individual is finally and once for all completely reduced to the individual consumer. And he's ruthless, he's self-centered, and he is compulsive. And then he becomes prey, as he said in his book, is the link of some evangelist groups of people that give meaning to his life. And I go now to the second point. Reversing the gaze on the West to prevent not only a new colonial. This is very useful, of course. He's saying, he gave a very good example when he says, Shakespeare is the Kalidas of England. I think this has to be done more and more. But then he'll say that reversing the gaze is interesting to prevent not only a new colonial way of thinking, which is very much in place today, adopting other very different and subtle shapes, but it is there. But it is also, and to me this is more important, to prevent a unipolar way of thinking, which we can understand as a kind of Western universalism. And here, and I would like, not so much to defer, but to point something perhaps for the discussion. The only thing, when I read the book, that reversing the gaze on the West should be perhaps, modified in the sense of reversing the gaze to a certain form of modernity. I say modernity as such, again, Professor Chowdhury made a very good distinction. I like it very much because it comes to my point. There are two kinds of modernity. One with freedom of mind, and the other with slavery of the taste, he says right now. Well, my contention and my opinion would be that globalization as it is happening right now, it's much more slavery of the taste than freedom of mind. Even if you have an outward democracy and an outward freedom. But really what we are going at is a kind of this, as I say, isolated consumer, which is prey to all kind of brands. And it's here when I would like to say a word of caution. This is no longer this rampant modernity, which is going to destroy, all ways of life. And as one friend of mine used to say in Barcelona, that this new modernity creates clonic landscapes. Clonic landscapes means that you take one landscape and reproduce it landscape everywhere. I say, coffee, any multinational, we open a mall, and this mall will look the same in Pennsylvania, in Banaras, in Delhi. These are these clonic spaces with more and more and more. All the world is becoming the same because of this compulsive, I say, and modernity, which is very important. And I think, to me, more than the West, is the real problem, because this rampant modernity is no longer Western. It's being fully adopted, and even in more efficient ways, say by the Chinese came. The Chinese, what they are showing to the world. The Chinese are showing to the world that to have neoliberal capitalism, you don't need a democracy. That's what they are showing, actually. Here, I differ a little bit, and we can come back to the book, you know. When you praise China in such glowing terms, saying that it's fine in its own way, I don't think so. I think, after all, and that's why, and I'm sorry to say, that's why many Westerners feel much more comfortable in China than in India. Why? Because the Chinese look so much as us, to say, and they will consume the same things, they will play golf, so a Westerner feels very comfortable in Beijing. He feels less comfortable in Delhi, and he feels much less comfortable in Banaras. The dharmic power is still here, you know. We have this hope in this wonderful city. So I think that there we need, more curva patch on the different kinds of modernity. That I agree with you, Rajiv, that this modernity has been generated by the West, but it's no longer Western only. The same way that science is no longer Western. I would like to say some authors say that this rampant modernity, this modernity is going to destroy so many cultures, is a combination of two things. As I say, neoliberal capitalism, which basically means consumerism, and on the other hand, what is called, and don't take me wrong now, the hegemony of scientific discourse. This is a thing where we must do much more curva patch also. And I am not against science. I don't mean to go back. But I will quote one, I think it's American, John Gray, that he says, science alone has the power to silence heretics. Basically, people are saying that science has taken the place of religion today. Why? Because only science has the double privilege to give hope to people. If you are ill, you don't go now to a pandit, you go to the hospital. That's one thing, giving hope. That before it was given by religion, now it's given by science, we will live. And the second function that science is playing is it has the ability of censorship. You know, if something is unscientific, then it's out of the discourse and you don't get your grant, etc., etc. So in this sense, he says, science alone has the power to silence heretics. Today is the only institution that can claim authority, like the church in the past. It has the power to destroy or marginalize independent thinkers. For us, science is a refuge from uncertainties, promising and in some measure delivering the miracle of freedom from thought, while churches have become sanctuaries of doubt. So, we can go on, there are many quotations, but we stop it here. Only the importance, of the hegemony of this discourse, and I insist, I am not against science, but when I speak of science here, I speak more of science as a social institution, not as a method in itself, and as an ideological institution, as I say, provides, ideology. Well, let's go to the third point, and we'll take much. Looking from the Darwin point of view. Of course, being here in Banaras, we are very, very close to the sources of Dharmic knowledge, especially in this university. And I would like to say that Dharmic point of view, and he said also, so I'm just basically making your points. It has, for me, Dharmic knowledge has two sides. One is Adhyatmic, as you say, the inner sciences, a very beautiful expression, the inner sciences, which we have been, consuming in the West since the time of Alexander. And has been really attracted to these Indian inner sciences, and they become, famous all over the world. But if nobody will dispute the ascendancy of India regarding inner sciences, we have also to recognize that in the Sanskrit tradition there is a lot of analytical knowledge. I mean, Tarka, we say in Sanskrit Tarka, we say Nyaya, we say Anvikshi, Yukti, even Sankhya is used in the sense. So I think it's very important, he's done in the book and he's done even earlier, to show the West that rationality is not a monopoly of the West. This is very important. And not only rationality, also humanism is not a monopoly of the West. Very few people know that one of the first attacks against capital punishment is found in the Mahabharata. Well before any European thinker start thinking about these humanistic questions that have become so important after for the construction of modernity. So we have, I think, more and more Amartya Sen, and this is then a little bit different from only underlining the differences. Amartya Sen says this also, that sometimes if we underline only the difference, so that's very easy to assimilate also for the West, because here we have the strange and different India, with this metaphysical and mystical knowledge. Well, but they are not able to think rationally like us. They are not able to think critically like us, which is a very typical Western. So, therefore, to recover the rational and the Tarkic aspects of the Sanskrit tradition, which is being done, I think it's been done by many scholars, both from the West and from the East. I would like to say, and I don't know if you would agree with me, that of course Indology has also some amount of critique in his book, but I think that even Western Indology has changed a lot. And Anant Kumaraswamy already said that in the 30s, that he said that there will be a new generation of scholars which will look, to Indian wisdom with Indian eyes. He said that in the 30s, and I think after the Second World War, the whole panorama of Indology, both thanks to Indian scholars and to Western scholars, has changed a lot. And even we know that there may be, but I think there are a lot of difference from how a scholar thinks today, even if he's American, and how he used to think, say, at the turn of the 19th century, or even before the Second World War. And I will finish here. I won't be a proper student of BHU if I don't give you a critique, right, of your book. And the critique, but I will critique you in your own words, right? As you said in the preface, in the introduction. You say in the introduction, I may be accused of using broad definitions, generalizations, and extreme contrasts, and indulging in the kind of essentialities that postmodern thinkers have correctly challenged. Well, I think the book has a little bit of that, right? And saying the crime, announcing the crime doesn't exonerate you. Even if you say, okay, I realize that I've been, perhaps you need to yell like this, because otherwise, I would say in the deafening cacophony of Western universalism, you won't be heard. But it's true that sometimes a depiction both of Christianity and even Westerners like myself are a little bit caricatures, right? It gets a little bit caricaturesque, little bit, and that, to me, and draws a little bit the appeal of the book somehow. I recognize the importance of it, but I think it's also a point to be seen. For instance, for an European, it's a little bit puzzling to see that the West there, it's only America,
Yes.
When America and Europe are so different, even now. Even now Greenwich was making fun of, Europe stands for one thing, America stands for another. I say the Chinese show us that we can have capitalism without democracy. The Americans show us that we can have democracy without equality, right? While in Europe, we are still trying, and we are failing, and as you know very well, the situation in Europe now is more than dramatic because of the recession. The loss of power, both ideologically and economic, it's a reality for Europe, a very strong reality. But still, I still feel that the European model, the wealth state, it's a dream. I don't know if any one of you has been able to, at least at the material level. At the spiritual level, that's another thing. The spiritual level is another thing because, and I will just finish, as Gandhi said, and also like very much in your book, the re-evaluation of Gandhi, especially in a wonderful book which is called Team Swaraj. But nobody takes it literally because that's for me, it's one of the most revolutionary books written in the 20th century. If you really put war by him, Swaraj. And therefore it's a very powerful, really a very powerful critique. But as I would say, you know, the difference between Europe and America do really matter. And somehow, you know, I understand you live in America and for you the West is America, but I just end up, you know, stating and reivindicating the difference between Europe and America. Thank you very much.
Dr. Pujol, in his presentation, and while commenting on the book by Rajiv Malhotra, so underlying the differences between our worldview and the Western worldview, and how these differences became more pronounced, or some of them were even invented after Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment, because prior to that, probably there was not much, and especially the kind of discourses, the universal discourses which became prevalent, like, you know, you talk about scientific discourse and anthropocentrism and so on, and how we need to challenge this kind of discourses in order to constitute another kind of modernity, because there can be modernity other than the Western modernity, there can be rationality other than the Western rationality. Now,